From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, K-State's Dan O'Brien with his latest insight on the grain market trends. Within that, he'll offer some thoughts about how that African swine fever calamity in China could have major ripple effects on the grain price trends ahead. Following Dan, then, K-State's Robin Reid on the opportunity for you crop producers to update your USDA commodity program payment yields. She has put together a new spreadsheet that you can use to calculate that. Later, K-State's Dave Nichols extends the invitation to the Animal Science and Industry Department's 2019 Family and Friends Reunion. And, of course, standing by to talk Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. On this, Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Good to have you along with us once more. For the grain market outlook and comments, we turn once again to Dan O'Brien of K-State Research and Extension, grain market economist based in Northwest Kansas. Dan, it's interesting that amidst all that's going on out there that would have the market's attention, the give and take on trade with China, also on that front, the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement in the balance. The energy markets were disrupted by that Saudi refinery incident. But with all of that and more floating out there, these grain markets still appear to have a pretty strong weather market flavor to them.
Well, yes. We anticipated a couple weeks ago that by the time we got to mid-September, we'd be watching for cold fronts and wondering if risk of a normal frost, or especially an early frost, would have an impact on the maturity of corn, soybeans, grain sorghum throughout the Corn Belt.
And we haven't had even a whiff of that yet.
We haven't had a whiff of any of that.
Yeah.
But what we have had is dry weather. In fact, parts of the country are sort of reaping the other side of that. There's a recognition that some really dry conditions have caused, if anything, some premature dying off of crops. I guess if you draw a line from the northern border of Indiana and go to the west and look north and south of that line, to the north we're wet, to the south we're dry. In fact, we're not just dry, we're droughty. So there'll be some damage to corn production in Kentucky, Tennessee, the southern parts of Illinois, Indiana, thereabouts. So I guess, Eric, with all the challenges we've had just getting the crop in this year, it would be just out of character to expect we'd have a smooth landing in terms of figuring out where this is going to go. It just doesn't seem to be in the cards right now.
Well, let's take up some things that are going on. And the export scene for corn and beans, while we're on those two crops, is quite slow.
Yeah, I think the USDA's projections are for good, healthy export numbers. And what we've seen on a weekly basis so far has been pretty slow. We try to characterize the corn futures market, the wheat futures market, even soybeans. About 2 weeks ago, we saw lows of below 355, 352 thereabouts for Dees corn. For Dees wheat, got down to about 380, 382 thereabouts. For soybeans, got down to about 850. And since then, all those markets have gone up about 10, 15 cents or so. Actually, soybeans up even more than that, about 30, 40 cents. So some optimism in the markets. Positive news about trade discussions between the U.S. and China has helped. We have had several announcements in the last week of grain export business coming to the U.S. Generally positive news about the North American trade agreement, although it's got a new name now, of course, but amongst Mexico, Canada, and the United States, good news about Japan and the U.S. in their trade negotiations, and that's taken especially positively by the wheat people as you see the the possibility that Japan would come in aggressively to buy U.S. products, even, I think, South Korea. South Korea, Taiwan, some of those countries in there are also lining up to be involved in this. So that's for the good. I do think that we need to pay particular attention to the key USDA report dates that are coming up here on the 30th of this month. That's a Monday. We'll have the grain stocks report. And the big thing that will tell us, I think, in particular, will be the amount of feeding of corn, of grain, sorghum, and now wheat that we'll have seen in that last quarter. They'll give us some idea of the strength of feed demand heading off into the current quarter, again, September, October, November. But also, it'll be kind of a pre-review of what we might expect coming into the October 10th combination of crop production reports and the WASDE supply-demand projections. October report, of course, will feature in-the-field measurements from the USDA National Ag Statistics Service, folks going out and checking plots in the field, plus farmer surveys, et cetera. So really a pretty important number there. Yields still, do we have good yields or bad yields? Well, what part of the country are we talking about? It's really the issue. And I think the acreage numbers, as they unwind, will probably have as much or more of an impact on what the final U.S. corn production number and for soybeans and other crops as the actual yield numbers will. I think if anything is different this year, it's that the acreage numbers are still out there to be wrestled with. So kind of an added risk this time around.
You touched upon it, though, there, Dan. There seems to be a growing interest in how much wheat is being fed to livestock right now.
Yes. When you look at the price ratios between corn and wheat on the futures, well, it would say, gosh, we're not feeding anything. A hard red winter wheat closed yesterday on the CME board at 409.5. Dees corn, 372 3/4, a ratio of 1.1 or 110%. Well, normally 105% is kind of what you think. Below that ratio, with wheat falling to that relative to corn, well, that'd be indicative of conditions that favor wheat feeding. However, if you look at cash prices down in the Garden City market, you've got a cash wheat price yesterday of $3.55 and a cash corn price of $3.68. Now, that's a ratio of 96%. That would be consistent with these discussions from within that market of wheat feeding, at least being considered, if not happening already in feedlots in that area. So just would not be surprised that we see a healthy amount of wheat feeding being reflected in the USDA numbers. And the first bellwether for that's probably this October report. Again, October the 10th, and you'll have the next report coming up on November the 8th. And then finally, January, when they have the D1 stocks numbers and their final set of surveys, that's probably our time of potentially greatest volatility and any surprises that would finally hit the market.
Well, we'll close out on this. You constantly have your eye out for, to put it this way, the next big thing that could really gel these markets. And you offer that what's going on in China with that disastrous outbreak of African swine fever absolutely decimating their hog industry there, that could well resonate not only through the livestock sectors, but the grain markets likewise.
It's really time for careful thought about what the ramifications are of that situation. And again, we don't want to just spread rumors, but reports of perhaps 40% of their swine herd destroyed, as much as 50%. Articles from informed sources indicating that China's efforts to halt the spread of that disease, and actually in a number of cases to rejuvenate sites that had been infected, are spottily effective, if not just flat-out ineffective. So adding those together, again, from our U.S. perspective, we look at that and say, gosh, we have had issues like that in the past and real challenges. We went to all-in, all-out contract feeding type arrangements that transformed our swine industry. And do they have to do that? Well, they'll have to do something like that to control a disease that just kind of defies normal situations in what they would view as a family farm context. I contend that it's probably some of the reason that China and the U.S. are now negotiating in a lot more friendly, constructive pattern is that China sees that they're going to need meat products from the U.S., particularly pork, make up the shortfall for what for them is a staple of their diet. You do read of Chinese companies looking at building facilities outside the country in Vietnam. I even wonder about the Black Sea region. Here you see reports from the Ukrainian government that likely in the next year they'll open up their farmland to be purchased by entities from outside their own country. Well, Ukraine grows an awful lot of corn and exports almost all of it. It's the United States, Brazil, Argentina, and Ukraine. Ukraine's not far behind Argentina. So there's an off-site situation where China, if they had business relationships there or independent companies went there, they could grow hogs and process them. The pork could go back to China. So if you start looking at the impacts of all that, then, if land in Ukraine goes towards feed grain production for hogs, well, that's not as much wheat exports that they would have. Mm-hmm. And if China brings in more pork exports from us, that'll increase feed demand here in the United States. So we wonder, well, what will be the next set of demand drivers that will affect our U.S. ag markets? Well, the ramifications of this disease coming out of China it's unanticipated. It's not steady as we go. It's something that China, they're dealing with their human population staple food, probably the primary meat product. They're taking serious measures. So I guess I'm probably banging the bell too much, Eric, but the point is that this is a big thing. And the impacts of this, I wonder when we look at Dees corn at $3.70 and November soybeans at $8.93, if we're really accounting for, anticipating what the changes brought about by this major livestock disease in China that's affecting their staple food, if we really are cognizant yet of the impacts of that change and how it'll affect the flow of grain, the amount of hogs grown in the U.S., if we ship them out or not, and the amount of hogs grown elsewhere in the world and the amount of feed used elsewhere. So there's potentially a sizable impact on ag markets that I really wonder if we're cognizant of quite yet.
Well, we'll see to what degree that interest builds as that story unfolds. And we will talk again next Friday. Dan, many thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
His weekly observations on the grain markets, that's K-State Research and Extension grain market economist Dan O'Brien. We'll be back in a moment on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues here on the K-State Radio Network. Along with us once more from the Agricultural Economics Department here at K-State, Research and Extension's Robin Reid. She and colleagues were on the road for quite a spell during the latter part of August into early September, conducting a series of 10 2018 Farm Bill meetings for producers, helping them look ahead to their decisions on commodity program participation for these coming years. And Robin, one of the things that you're going to share with us today is the opportunity for producers amidst the Farm Bill workings to update their payment yields on their crop production, which we'll get into. But tell about those meetings and more or less what were the primary topics out there on producers' minds.
Well, as you said, we traveled the entire state, did 10 meetings, spread out as well as we could to cover the whole state. So we saw a lot of Kansas in 3 weeks. And overall, very good participation in these meetings. Producers are very interested to know what's changed with the ARC and PLC programs. You know, we still have the same programs, but there's been some modifications. So getting that information out there and the sign-up dates and kind of just all the information that producers need to know before they lock in their decision for the next 2 years. And I think that's the biggest takeaway in this program. It's a 2-year decision now and not a 5-year. So making this decision now on the 2019 and 2020 crop, and then they'll have an every year decision after that.
It's worth stressing there's not a huge sense of urgency on decision-making yet, although the opportunity to do so is already open to producers. They've quite a window of time to get this done, right?
Absolutely. So They actually have until March 15th of next year to make their elections and enroll for the 2019 and 2020 crops. So we were on the road now because the election period is open for 2019, and it'll open after October 1st for 2020 crops. But I think the best thing, we wanted to do was get all of the information out there so producers knew the decisions that they need to be making, when they had to be making them, and what things to think about. So what I was telling everyone is get through harvest, don't stress about this now. This winter when things slow down is really the time to be evaluating these decisions.
Coming up soon, a one-time opportunity producers can look at in updating their program payment yields for commodity program payout purposes. What's this?
So in the 2014 Farm Bill, producers had the opportunity to reallocate their base acres and update their program yields. I'm sure our audience mostly knows, but just to reiterate, when you're doing FSA farm programs, it gets paid on your base acres, your base commodities, and your program yield, which is the established yield that FSA has on the books for those base acres that you have. Now, the 2014 Farm Bill allowed you to update that program yield and reallocate the base. This time around, there's no reallocation option. We had that question a lot as we were out in the countryside. I know a lot of producers are having corn and soybeans grown on sorghum and wheat base these days, and that's just what they're going to have for this next Farm Bill.
Some procedural matters here, Robin. Producers can update those payment yields crop by crop, correct?
Yes. So you're going to do the update crop by crop, and you're going to look at the yield on your farm from 2013 to 2017. Last Farm Bill, we had this option, and it was 2008 to 2012. And there was a lot of drought years in that history, is why we even got this option again. So you'll be needing to produce and certify your yields from 13 to 17. Crop insurance records are absolutely the best way to try to, have records of these yields. And the calculation is fairly complicated. I'll kind of talk through it, but just know all you need to do is produce the yields, and FSA will tell you what your updated yield might be. And if it's higher than the one you have now, you want to update. If it's not, then you just retain your old yield, and there's no penalty at all for updating some and not updating others.
Now, a finer point, if a producer finds themselves with a year's worth of data missing or just not there, what's the alternative for them?
Sure. So we're going to get in the weeds a little bit here. So I'm going to talk through the procedure and kind of address that as we get there. So in the years 2013 to 2017, you're going to take the years that you planted the crop. So let's use wheat as an example. If you planted wheat 4 out of the 5 years, it's a 4-year average. If you planted 2 out of the 5 years, it becomes a 2-year average. So you're only looking at the years that you planted a crop on that farm. Now, if you had a significant yield loss that year, you have an opportunity to replace your own farm yield with what's called a plug yield. And that's 75% of the county's average from 2013 to 17. And I have all these numbers in the publication that I just published yesterday. So that way you can look up what your substitute number would be. To your point, if you're missing information or can't certify a yield, but it was reported that there was planted acres of that commodity that year, you can use that substitute yield. And a good example of this is if tenants have changed and the owner wants to look at doing this update, but he is not able to obtain the records from a previous tenant, he can use that substitute yield instead of using the actual yield for that year.
Now, it may sound a tad complicated, but there is a handy spreadsheet that's available to producers in walking through that calculation, which we'll tell folks about.
Yes, and how this gets complicated, so they take your average yield from those years, they multiply it by 90%, and then there's this detrending factor that got added in on this Farm Bill. And that is a little confusing. What they did is try to detrend what that yield would have been back when we updated in the 2014 Farm Bill. So it's a national ratio of the yields of that crop in 2013 to 2017 compares to the yields of that crop from 2008 to 2012. So it is a whole can of worms updating this program yield. But you're right. What I did in my publication is walk through how you would hand calculate that number, just so you know how to do it if you're curious. But I don't like doing math any more than anybody else. So we have a spreadsheet calculator that looks exactly like the way that you'd hand calculate, and all you have to do is put in your county and your crop and what your yields were, and it will run all those calculations for you.
That spreadsheet is available. We'll tell you how to get to it in just a second. Very generally speaking, is it best for producers, say, participating in PLC, to update or not?
Well, if you can update to a higher program yield than you currently have, that just means that your PLC payments will grow quicker as price falls. So again, using wheat, $5.50 is the reference price for wheat. When the national average marketing year price falls below that, you're going to start getting PLC payments. Say that is $5. That'd be a 50-cent PLC payment. That 50 cent per bushel gets multiplied by the program yield of your farm. So you can easily see if you had a 40 bushel program yield, that's going to be a lot larger payment than a 30 bushel program yield per se. So yes, you definitely want to update that number. If you are in the Ark County program, that number doesn't get used, but just know this is tied to your farm, and since they offered it this farm bill and the last farm bill, I don't see it being offered again in the next farm bill. You still want to take advantage of this because you may switch to PLC later in this farm bill, or in the next farm bill, that program yield might come into play.
Yeah. And we're looking over participation for the next 2 years. There will be a decision made year by year following that, correct?
Yeah, so just to kind of go over that timeline once again, producers can elect and enroll in the 2019 crop year from now until March 15th. Starting October 1st, they can enroll in the 2020 program. So you're making the same decision for both, but you do have to enroll for both years. So you might as well wait till after October 1 for one thing. The payment yield update, you actually have until September 30th of 2020 to get that done. And the reason is that does not go into effect until the 2020 crop year. They gave FSA a little more time there to get that part done. So, yeah, but you can do it all at the same time.
Right.
I would encourage producers, go in and do your 19 enrollment, 20 enrollment, your payment yield update, sometime between now and March 15th, and then you will be done.
And you say producers are asking about these matters right now, so if they're inclined, maybe right after harvest, to do so, they can explore the options here. And that spreadsheet is found where, Robin?
So if you go on Ag Manager, under the Ag Policy section, we have a whole page with 2018 Farm Bill information. You're going to find a number of things there, but this one that we're talking about today is the Payment Yield Update publication and spreadsheet calculator. Along with the spreadsheet calculator, there's a number of tools, number of frequently asked questions, publications, and just general information on this farm bill. If you didn't catch one of our regional meetings, there are still some county farm bill meetings going on right now too, so check with your county. But we will keep putting information on Ag Manager as we get it developed and we go throughout this sign-up period.
And your team has been very forthcoming with updated information on these farm program decisions as they'll come forth here in the months ahead. So producers, by all means, take advantage of what's out there at agmanager.info. And in this case, a full write-up and examples in as far as this program payment yield update choice that you'll have here in the coming months. And we appreciate the time. As always, Robin, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
She's Robin Reid, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. After the break, we'll have a preview of that major event being put on in early October by the Animal Sciences and Industry Department at K-State, the Family and Friends Reunion, plus more for you still ahead here on Agriculture Today.
Did you eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today from Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson here. Well, today is the final day to pre-register for the 5th Annual Family and Friends Reunion, put on by the Animal Sciences and Industry Department here at K-State. It is set for Friday, October the 4th, from 5:30 until roughly 9:30 at the Stanley Stout Center on the north end of the campus. This event annually celebrates the department's alums as its family and thanks its industry friends for contributions to animal agriculture. Longtime K-State animal scientist Dave Nichols is among the lead planners of this exceptional event.
Oh, I think it'll be a great event. This will be our fifth one, Eric. Fifth Family and Friends Reunion, October 4th at Stanley Stout Center.
For those who have not been to this before, more or less outline how it's oriented and what happens there.
Well, there's a lot of things, and one of the things that has always impressed me by this is that there's kind of something for everybody. The LMIC board kind of came up with this idea, and Dr. Patsy Houghton, Justin Jansen on that board put a gobs of work in. It's a lot of work, but it's a great event. And, well, we'll just start with some of the activities. There's a kiddie barnyard that appeals to all these kids. Justin Jansen just amazes me, all the things he puts together. It's like Santa Claus for these kids. And so that's for the youngest ones. We have, of course, a lot of reminiscing, older people coming back. And then there's all the group in between. One thing that has impressed me is how we are able to attract the long-term supporters, but we're also getting some recent graduates and then kind of everything in between. So it's really a great evening of food and friendship and fellowship and music and just a good time.
You, the department, have expressly invited back faculty from years past to be part of this year's event.
Yeah, this year, kind of a special event. We're doing a special invite to the Don Good hires. And, of course, there aren't a lot of this. I'm one of the younger one of those, and so but it is great because it's going to bring back some people that maybe haven't been back for a while. I know we have some people coming from quite a distance, and so I think it'll be an added attraction for those people to come see some of those folks that Don Good hired. And Don's last hires were around the late 80s when Jack Riley took over, and so but that's an added bonus this year.
You bring up the name Don Good. Of course, that resonates so well in the entire industry nationwide, not just here in Kansas. The Don Good Impact Award is presented at the Family and Friends Reunion this year, and the honoree is who?
Kansas Livestock Association, and it's been a fantastic award. And as you said, Eric, when you say Don Good, that's a legend. He was one of a kind, and to have an award with his name attached to it, when you say Don Good Impact, that speaks a lot. And we've had 5 of those. The first one was my friend Miles McKee, who will be 90 October 8th, about that week, so throw that out. And then we've had Cattle Facts, Certified Angus Beef, Sharon Swartz, and now KLA. And KLA does so much for our industry, and so we're honored we have them as our honoree this year.
It's a great evening. So much is swirling around this event each year. Registration procedures, what does one need to do? And it is, to point out, not just for alums, but friends of the department.
Right. It's called Family and Friends for a reason. You don't have to be an animal science alum to come. And we actually have a far-reaching presence and a lot of people to come. Actually, the pre-registration deadline is September 20th. And there's a website. Go to our K-State website. But the other thing to do, Lois Schreiner, call her 785-532-1267, I believe it is. Of course, Lois does so much for everybody. That would be a way a lot of us would do. Of course, Facebook, it's Family and Friends on that as well. We would like to have a count. We will have walk-in registrations as well, but they might be limited. So, the quicker people can get registered. It's a wonderful event, Eric. It takes a lot of work, but you're going to get a chance to connect with a lot of people. K-State Marching Band, the entire band is going to be there. Dr. Dave Grieger has a band called 2 Million Degrees, and they're really good. So some of the students that had Dr. Grieger, they'll want to come hear his band. We've got an a cappella group going to sing the national anthem. We mentioned the Don Good Award with KLA, and then the Don Good hires, as well as the Kitty Barnyard. So great food, fun, fellowship. Just come and join us. We'd love to have everybody.
K-State's Dave Nichols. The pre-registration, $25 for adults, $10 for students 13 and older. Again, due by today so that they can get an accurate meal count. You can take care of that a couple of ways, as Dave said, by calling Lois Schreiner at the department directly, 785-532-1267. Again, 785-532-1267. Or go to the website, asi.k-state.edu. We most certainly hope to see you there at the 5th Annual Animal Sciences and Industry Department Family and Friends Reunion at K-State, the afternoon and evening of Friday, October the 4th, 2 weeks from today. Up for you now, this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Here's Marcia Boswell.
It's September, so you know what that means. Time to break out the drills and air seeders and plant some wheat. The basics of picking your planting times and how to ensure the best start for your wheat crop revolves around soil temperature, moisture, timing, and depth. According to Kansas State University, the ideal soil temperature for germination is between 54 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything hotter than around 90 degrees, seeds might falter, or wait until rains bring soil temperatures to the right levels for germination. Since planting and the beginning part of the growing process for wheat is a race against time, it's important to get the seed in with enough time for it to begin root development and grow a couple of tillers. Thankfully, the latest seed innovations have helped reduce the chances of having winter damage to the wheat, so being a tad bit late is not as big of an issue as it once was. Still, despite these advancements, having the right moisture at planting is key to proper germination and a successful wheat crop. The point when the wheat seed begins to take in water is called imbibing. According to Michigan State's Extension Service, soil should have a moisture content of around 35 to 45% in order to supply the seed with enough moisture to imbibe and germinate. There are 4 zones of ideal planting in Kansas. K-State's Extension Wheat Specialist, Dr. Romulo Lolato, has done research and concluded sowing date plays a major role in crop yields. Planting after ideal dates can mean a whopping decrease in yields of about 3.5 bushels an acre per day. Depth is another factor to consider. Ideal placement would be around 1-inch deep plantings. This allows enough seed coverage and access to enough moisture. Shallower than about 1/2 inch might leave your seed wide open to the elements. However, if you have your wheat planted too deep, generally over 2 inches deep, your wheat's coleoptile that encases the first true leaf might finish growing before even busting through the soil's surface. This leads to a crumpled first leaf, and you might even have to replant your field. As planting season begins in some parts of Kansas, choosing the right date to plant is way harder than just putting seeds into the ground. It boils down to having the right climate, moisture, and depth. Keep these factors in mind as you plant this season. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia. And this is Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This is Agriculture Today, and rounding out our Friday edition, Kansas agricultural weather in the spotlight. Joining us once more, climatologist Mary Knapp of K-State Research and Extension. As we come off, Mary, a warmer than normal week, no doubt, around Kansas. It may cause discomfort for some folks, but for those who are anxious to see their crops build up those growing degree units, this was just the ticket.
It was very nice. We need to keep in mind, though, that in the western areas where we've got that higher elevation, they did see some nighttime lows drop down below the mid-40s. That's a concern with the sorghum production because, of course, sorghum will slow down development at that level. And even though you got back up into the 90s, it didn't progress as rapidly as might have been hoped. So we'll take it. Overall, we averaged almost 7 degrees warmer than normal for the week ending on Tuesday. We were warm yesterday and Wednesday as well, so it has been very, very positive for getting some of those heat units in there. The other positive for that is that until yesterday, we were pretty much on the dry side, and that has allowed for some progress. There are people that are still trying to get hay put up. They're waiting for that corn to dry down so that they can get that harvested. And in the southeast, drying down enough just so they could get into the field. So we were drier than normal for the week. Only the southeast was wetter than normal, but that was only by 9/100ths of an inch. And considering the excess moisture that they've endured most of the summer, that seems like a very small amount.
Now, we've still, you note, drought welling up in the southwest part of the state and, in fact, intensifying in certain locations.
Right. It's been more that it has been expanding. We have a larger area of abnormally dry conditions, and we also saw an expansion of the D1 or moderate drought in that southwest area. They did see some rain the previous week, but with the temperatures in the 90s and a strong south wind, the evaporative demand has been very, very high. And this is a critical time in those areas where producers are trying to get their fall planted crops in the ground, particularly winter wheat. You don't want to be planting that into the hot, dry soils, so a little rain out west would be very welcome.
Well, it started yesterday. Moisture has been chugging in from the Gulf area. Some rains around and about Kansas. Yesterday continuing into today on a spotty basis. But that outlook suggests that this weekend may feature heavy rain.
Right, and it's going to be very heavily biased towards the eastern part of the state. Basically, you get east of Salina, and you're going to be in the 2 to as much as 7-inch range. In Kansas City area, they may even see higher amounts. From maybe just west of Manhattan to Salina, it'll be more in the 1.5 to 2-inch range. But as you get out into the western part of the state where they could do with some moisture, they're looking at 1/4 of an inch to maybe 3/4 of an inch of rain. Welcome, but it's certainly not going to put an end to the drought situation in that southwest corner.
And moderating temperatures along with that rainfall?
We are expecting moderating temperatures. It is still going to be warmer than normal, but we're looking at highs in the 80s rather than the 90s. Nighttime low temperatures probably more in the 60s rather than in the 70s. It may be a little bit cooler in the west, again with that higher elevation and lower humidities. When we look at the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks, both of those favor wetter than normal, or at least a slight chance of wetter than normal conditions, and also warmer than normal. When we check the October outlook, which was released yesterday, it's equally likely to be wetter or drier than normal, but the temperature is expected to stay on the warm side.
So that gives our row crops a better chance, it sounds, to finish out without major consequences from an early freeze, perhaps.
Well, it at least gives us a lesser chance of an early freeze. The problem it gets into is as we get into October and later, the average temperatures tend to drop quite a bit. You get out to Colby, the average low temperature at the beginning of October is just 42. The average low temperature at the end of October is below freezing. So, again, it could be warmer than normal, but not necessarily warm enough to push those crops along very quickly.
But encouraging for winter wheat growers in that it is a wet outlook, which will help that crop along, provided it is seeded in a timely fashion.
Well, provided that we both get it seeded in a timely fashion and that we don't have a repeat of last October where it got excessively wet. Mm-hmm. We would be perfectly happy with a normal October rainfall pattern, get enough moisture to start the month to get the wheat seeded in and off to a good start, but not so much that we're flooding out the fields and dealing with a replant situation, or even worse, a long delay to get it in. Again, we don't want a repeat of last year. We have gotten the outlook for the October, November, December time frame to end the year. That is favoring wetter than normal conditions and also warmer than normal conditions. So we'll have to see how that moisture is spread out over the 3-month period.
All right. And last thought here, looking ahead to this weekend before us, potential for severe weather out there, Mary?
There is a potential for severe weather. Most of the problem is likely to be hail and strong winds. But again, in these areas, it won't take much moisture to create localized flooding issues. And we are looking at some fairly intense rains, particularly Saturday night into Sunday. And then again, we'll see this isn't the last of that moisture coming through. There may be something midweek next week as well. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Be aware, folks, and enjoy your weekend. Mary, thank you for coming by.
Thanks, Eric.
Mary Knapp, along with us, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension, with the very latest from the Weather Data Library here at the university. And our time is, in fact, away for today and the week. Our thanks to you for listening in, and please be back with us right here this same time on Monday. Until then, Eric Atkinson bidding you a good weekend for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.